Welcome to the Civic Circus Podcast. I am Spencer Duncan.
And I'm Trae McPherson.
Let's start the show. So, Spencer Duncan, sometimes I get called Duncan because people think I have like either two first names or two last names. Or they like to spell Duncan like Dunkin' Donuts, of course. Yeah. I wish I had Dunkin' Donuts money. But, all right. So, you introduced yourself as Trae, but your real name is spelled Traevor, right?
Yes.
So, here's the question of the day.
Okay.
Is it Traevor or is it Traevor?
It's Traevor.
See?
It's Traevor. So a lot of people, the reason why I go by Trae is because so many people mispronounce my name and they want to call me Traevor. I had a teacher in middle school. She was trying to read my name and then she called me Trayvon. And so I said, I need to have an easy name. So I just cut my name in half, used the first four letters Trae, made Trae. And I said, you know what? That's going to be how I introduce myself from now on. And so ever since then, I've been Trae McPherson.
Did you ever ask your parents, why didn't you spell it Trayvor if you wanted them to pronounce it that way?
Well, so what happened is that originally I was going to be named Austin Trae. And my brothers somehow got a veto. I can't believe
obviously older.
Right. They were in the high school age, and so they're like, we're not having a brother named Austin. And so I said, my mom is like, okay, well, we'll name him Traevor John. And so the John comes from family members, and she wanted Trae somewhere in the name, so I got Traevor John McPherson. And the other point is with my name is that I'm adopted. And so my birth mother, she also would have given me a weird first name, Derek, Darik.
Oh yeah,
like an oil derrick, I guess. And so it's like, how do you live both lives knowing that no matter what you're gonna have a weird name? Yep. And so that's
the Trae. It is. Man.
Trae.
That was the easiest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I start off with folks here. Just talk about your connection to Topeka, how you ended up here and became a Topekan, because I know you're not from here.
No, I am not from here. I'm originally from the Wichita area, down there by Andover, Augusta. I technically consider Augusta, Kansas, my hometown. Yeah. Augusta, Andover, Rose Hill. I went to Rose Hill High School, graduated from there. I wanted to come to Washburn for a really long time because they were known for their law school stuff. And I was given an opportunity to be able to come up here in 2014, I think. Could have been 2016. I can't remember anymore. It's been long enough.
Long enough. It all runs together.
I've slept enough that it all runs together.
It's funny because you're the second person I talked to today. Someone moved here about 5 years ago, but they couldn't. They were using COVID as their. Wait, was it right before COVID or right after? But even they were like, I guess if you're here long enough and you can't remember, it means you've been here a while.
Yeah. So I was living in low income housing, and I had the opportunity to come up to Washburn and live in the Washburn Village there on campus.
Oh yeah.
And so I did legal studies. While I was there, I got to work at the state legislature. I was a vice president of a fraternity. I was the speaker pro tem of the Washburn Student Government Senate. Then later on, I decided to stay in Topeka. I really enjoyed Topeka. I like that there's no traffic jams in Topeka. Plenty of potholes.
Yeah, lots of cones, lots of cones, and lots of diversions and detours.
Yes, but never a traffic jam. I mean, we've been getting a few a little bit more lately because of some of the highway work.
Yeah.
But outside of that,
and that's only going to get worse. So
right.
Prepare yourself.
Right. And normally I can get around town in 8 minutes, and I love that versus any other place. And I hardly ever get lost in town. I didn't. I figured out that there was numbered streets and names of towns, names of presidents, like, this is easy. And so later on, I got hooked in with my city councilor, and I was able to get on to the board of directors for Breakthrough House. Mm-hmm. So I was vice president of the Breakthrough House board of directors for a little while, and I was also on the board of directors for Community Action, the Community Action of Shawnee County, Northeast Kansas area. So I've been out in the community. I've done a lot of that for a while. I was the manager and then later regional manager for the Leap Trampoline Park there off of 37th Street. A lot of people don't know that exists. It's right there by Genesis Health Club. there on 37th.
My son used to jump there a lot. He used to go to the Genesis camp, and so they would come over there a couple times throughout the year and burn that energy.
Oh, all the time. And there's a lot of kids that like to go to the trampoline park, and it's a totally different environment versus Sky Zone.
They're very different.
They're completely different opposites. So if you've never been, there's your plug. You know, I've done that. I've you know, I now work for state government. I work in the Department of Corrections over at the Kansas Juvenile Correctional Complex. Anything I say today is not representing the state government.
Right.
I'm not representing any other entities. I'm just representing myself today. But, you know, there's just a lot of work to be done in Topeka. I've bought a house in North Topeka last year. You know, so being 31 and bought a house, pretty exciting. Not very many people get to say that they can do that.
No, that's, you know, for all the housing issues we do have in Topeka, we need to build more. And we are still in a fairly affordable community for that. Part of that's because we're in Kansas in the Midwest. But
we have a great standard of living in Kansas. It's just we don't have enough exciting, sexy tourism. Right? You know, a big ball of twine out in a city, you know, is not the same as
Big Brutus isn't the international
right. It doesn't beat Shamu at the, you know, the gardens there. Yes. So you know, that's my big connection to Topeka is when I moved here, you know, you either find out as a Topekan whether you love Topeka or you hate Topeka. If you're a real Topekan, usually there's no in between. Either you love it or you hate it, and then you stay here. And so, you know, throughout these years, I've really enjoyed Topeka. I'm one of those people that I love Topeka. I want to see Topeka get better. I want more involvement in the community. I want more engagement. So we're constantly working on.
We're gonna shut my computer. It's making noise over there.
Yeah, it was beeping.
I know, it's beeping, man.
It was
annoying.
Well, it was a nice
My kid, when he was here, was squeaking the chair. I had to tell him, stop squeaking the chair. But today was my fault. The computer was beeping.
Yeah, so that's my, you know, connection. Also, one of the big things that I assisted with, I know Forge did a lot of work on it, but I was one of the speakers at City Council for our current Topeka city flag.
In support of?
In support of the new flag. And the big reason for that was because Wichita had just made their new flag, and there had been a TED Talk that came out that was talking about flag rules. And a lot of people watched it, and basically the guy was like, it needs to be simple. It needs to be not super busy design. You know, it shouldn't have words on it because it's like a postcard from really far away.
Yeah, you just want to see it.
And you want to be able to see, right. And so Wichita had just passed their own with the Native American stylage on theirs. And so I was like, we definitely need to follow suit, because one of the things that Wichita did was they made their flag kind of open source, just like Topeka did. And that was super important to make it open source, because then the community could adopt it. And you know, if you watch around the city, you'll see that there's businesses that'll take the flag and they've turned it into buffaloes, they've turned it into teeth, they've turned it into whatever. And now it's, you know, that little weird star thing that people complained about at first. Well, now it's starting to really represent Topeka. And you know, we're still using the city seal. There, you know, that hasn't gone away.
It's still on a lot of official stuff that the city uses.
Yeah, and I like the city seal. I have no problems with it. I just didn't like it on the flag,
right?
Because like you can't see it from far away. And then green and yellow just didn't really, you know.
I still use the green and yellow. I still like the green and yellow, and it has green and yellow on it.
Yeah,
I incorporated all those colors into the flag. I think the flag was very. It was very mixed reaction when it came out, but I think through the years now, people have warmed up to it, and now don't really have this. They look at it now and like, oh, that's a good flag, but I think early on, people for whatever reasons,
it changes hard. Changes hard for everybody, and there's always some sort of loss that comes with change, and a lot of people don't recognize that. Anytime that we bring in something new, that means someone else loses something. And when you forget to talk about that loss and you recognize it and try to bring those people along, you know, that's where we get the, you know, when we've installed bike lanes, there's a lot of people who are like, why do we need bike lanes in Topeka? Well, there is a group of people who do use the bikes, and it improves, you know, city transportation needs. But then also, you know, people who, you know, they're like, oh, well, now I can't drive as fast as I want on 12th Street. Well, you shouldn't have been driving that fast anyway.
I don't know. Some people now call it the 12th Street Expressway because there's no stop signs now.
Well, yeah. Well, no, I mean, I loved it because there was no stop signs before. I mean, right. I used to use it to come to work at the legislature. I used to have to go park over by the courthouse, by the Supreme Court building, and then I would get to walk across the street, and that light, they had it set up to where you'd push it and it would automatically change. And I'm like, oh, wouldn't that be great to be a justice? And you just press the button and you walk across the street and all the traffic stops.
So I want to talk about your work in corrections, and not like the day-to-day nuts and bolts of it. But you obviously see a lot of folks in distress who come through there, and especially you're in the juvenile area, right? So you're seeing the younger folks who are. So what has that taught you about Topeka, about areas where we are maybe doing some good, but also where we are maybe failing those young folks, in ways we can help them better to keep them out of there in the first place?
I mean, we do have a lot of community programs that are trying. I know that the Topeka Police Department, I just graduated from the Citizens Academy recently. They've got several programs that they're trying to keep the youth out of bad behavior. A lot of our youth have been through the foster care system. A lot of our youth have homes that are not as stable as would be likable. Unfortunately, a lot of these young people have also done some very serious crimes. The KJCC is a facility that houses juveniles from the ages of 10 to 22 and a half. Yes, I mean, that's the lowest that we can go.
But that's
the lowest that we can go. So this is murder. This is sexual assault, rape. This is assault with a deadly weapon type situation. These are felony kids. We are not putting kids who are doing truancy normally into state prison. This is state prison level, and so I think one of the things that the community absolutely should help with is when they get released, we find a way to make sure they don't go right back into the same environment that they came from. Because there's a lot of treatment programs. We have mental health professionals. We have a school in there. We have all of these different programs. They have jobs to go to that they get paid money for, and it's not always minimum wage, but it's more than what the adults were getting paid.
Well, I don't know. There's a city, so I mean, obviously, recidivism is a problem on any of those levels, and we have some community groups who will help with that. Some nonprofits. I know that Shawnee County is working really hard, especially as they're developing this mental health center to help folks to reduce that. But I honestly don't think we as a city put any resources into helping reduce recidivism. And I can't think of a single program. I can't think of a single dollars we support, whatever that looks like. I can't think of one that the city has. Doesn't mean there's not people like your point in the city doing it, but as a city government, I can't think of any that we've got. Yeah.
And the other point too is that when you have this type of thing, it's also important to talk about because of the type of population we have. We also talk about the success rate, which is that opposite number of recidivism. So it's important to note when we're having 70, 75, 80% success rate, that means that most of our residents are not going to the adult system.
Yeah, which is great.
They've learned their lesson. They're trying to stay okay, and it's difficult for them. They have a lot of challenges ahead of them when they get out, and unfortunately there are some that, I see them and then I see them on the news later, and it's heartbreaking. We do our best to teach them, at the same time, we cannot let them try to kill each other in there.
Right.
So that's why it's a corrections environment. We cannot let them hurt each other, and we cannot let them hurt themselves. And it's a lot of stress. I'm 31 and I already have gray in my hair. And I've only been doing it for 2.5 years or so. But like I said, I don't represent them, but
and that's why
we do a lot of good work there, I think.
Yeah, because like I said, I think it is a window into what some of the problems and issues are, and because we talk about that a lot as a city when we look at here's the problem. Like as we look at violence reduction programs, right? There's only so much. The goal is to be preventative. I mean, really, police's job is usually to step in after the problem has occurred, right?
Yeah.
But we as a city also look at, okay, but what areas can we utilize those resources to not even get to that point? And and part of that is you got to look at the root cause. What are the root causes? Put your resources in those root causes, and you're preventing it, as opposed to just putting all your resources into, well, after the fact, we hope we'll take care of it.
Yeah, and that's also the nature of law and government generally, right? Is that it is built to be reactive. It's not that government wants these things to continue. Unaddressed behavior is condoned behavior, but we cannot, at the same time as the government, be out there trying to preemptively make decisions when nothing has happened yet. Yeah. And so it's a tough road to walk down.
We haven't figured out the Minority Report where we can just see it in the future and just go arrest people before we think they're about to happen.
Right. And we saw what happened in that movie, and it didn't turn out very well. But I'm grateful for the time that I've had there so far. I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned a lot about these residents and the kind of situations that we're all facing. And not all of the residents are from Topeka. We get them from all over the state. It's the only juvenile prison facility in the state. So there you go.
So you have a history of government that's a little different, even than just either working for it or like you did at the legislature. You've put your hat in the ring before. You took a crack at the politics thing. You want to tell people about that? It's an interesting story.
Yeah. When I was 20 years old, I ran for mayor of Augusta, Kansas. I was at the time there was an issue with water quality in the city. We had just changed from the water at El Dorado Lake to the city's lake. And so it changed the taste completely. There was a colorization in the water at the time. People really noticed it. And so it was a big issue. There was a lot of money being put in to try to build different pipelines because the city of El Dorado was charging Augusta quite a bit of money
to have access to the water. Yeah.
But it was also on a use it or lose it basis. So if the city didn't use up all the water, they still got charged the same amount.
I don't think people, just a little quick side note on that, we have the river here in Topeka, and that makes a big difference. I don't think people, if you don't travel out to parts of Kansas, western Kansas and middle Kansas, you don't realize that we have a lot of communities that don't have access to their own water and have to find that resource and then buy it from those other communities. And that is a whole different dynamic in how they get water, pay for water, deal with water in general. But.
Yes. And for a number of communities, water is an enterprise resource. So like the city of Topeka charges the water, right? You get a water bill from the city. There's a number of cities that have enterprise systems for other things like the municipal airport. Augusta had a municipal airport, so it was an enterprise. And so one of the things that I had, talked about was, we needed a mayor's office that was open to communication, and we needed to work on the water issue. And if we weren't going to fix it, well, then we needed to give people Brita water filters to help in the meantime until it got fixed. Now that might cost money, but at the same time,
you should have gotten a Brita sponsorship, man.
Right.
Being like, come on, guys, hop on.
That was the big issue of that. But there were people who were thanking me for running for mayor because the guy was going to be unopposed. At the time that the mayor before, she had gotten herself up to the state legislature. So that position vacated. He wanted her in it. No one ran against her. He was the president of the council. And so he got put in the mayor's spot because he was president of the council. And then he ran to be elected mayor. And so I rented billboards and I had a small team of volunteers, got 17% of the vote.
Yeah.
So for being 20 years old, not run for anything, not known for anything, it was a wonderful experience. I would do it again. And the thing that only upset me later was I found out that about 2 years into the 4-year term, he ended up resigning from the position.
Yeah.
Now, me losing enabled me to come to Topeka and do all the other things that I've done. And, my progress at Washburn. One of the big things I did over there was, Americans with Disabilities access. There was a lot of buildings that didn't have restroom access properly for people who were wheelchair. It was hard for even regular people to get around in those, and so they renovated all that. They fixed their lighting to be more white. Even though it was bright, it looked dingy, and there was concerns about safety and being visibility with the lighting. And so they fixed that also. I don't have a plaque anywhere there, but I take pride in knowing that I got together a group of people from the community, staff, from the university, students, and I sent out binders with checklists. People didn't realize that soda fountains needed to be a certain height.
Oh, certain, yeah.
So I've always been out there trying to make things better wherever I'm at.
I've always said nobody should ever run unopposed. Now, obviously, as an incumbent, you sit there and say, boy, wouldn't it be great if nobody ran against me? Because, of course, that's selfish, but it's not good for the process. It's not good for the democracy. It's not good for everybody when they run the first time, or if they're the incumbent, should have to stand up and talk to people and have someone sit across from them and say, why are you running against me? And even if it's just, hey, mostly you're a good guy, but the water thing, and here we are, and you should at least have to answer for that. And if you get reelected, that's great, but at least we got your thoughts on it, and you had to go through the conversation and go through the process. So I've always said, and that's, people ask me when I got reelected this past time on council, I had someone run against me like, oh, are you disappointed someone running against me? No, I'm glad. Like, this is good for all of us that we're out there forcing me to have these conversations and walk the doors, and it's good for me. It's good for us.
Getting out in the community and explaining what your thoughts are and what kind of leadership you want to exhibit and what kind of issues are important to you is how you can then engage others to solve problems of the day, whatever they are. And sometimes people feel like they can't talk to their government. It's important that people know that they can, and those people want to be responsive to you. And, it's not some ivory tower, and it shouldn't feel that way.
Well, they always say in sports, well, there's no moral victories. First of all, I don't know that I agree with that, but I think sometimes in politics there are, in the sense that, in your case is an example of that. There was a water issue. If he had gone unopposed, wouldn't have been talked about.
Right.
And so changes were made because it forced that conversation. And so for you, it stinks that you lost.
Right.
But the flip side is you can look back and say, yeah, but if someone hadn't challenged that issue, those changes may not have happened at all, or definitely not in the time period they needed to happen.
Yeah. No, I had a whole binder of the other issues, and a number of the things that I brought up ended up getting addressed after the election. Yeah. So even though I didn't make it on the council, they ended up recognizing that those were issues, and they were trying to work on it. And they ended up building the pipeline anyway, because they were trying to save money for the city budget by using the local water supply, but they were able to get something done with the water quality, but they were also still pulling some, I think, from El Dorado. That may have changed since then, but again, it's a lesson in, when you stand up and you are being genuine and you're trying to make a positive change and you're trying to engage people, there's a possibility that it can change, and you just have to be willing to take the leap.
And it's hard to get people to run for office, period, especially in this day and age. It's only gotten tougher. In my job with the League of Kansas Municipalities, that's what we try to do, is encourage people to just run for office. And they sit there these days and say, why would I subject myself to that? And we're like, but that's how we need, if more good people would run, the process would look very different some days in some communities.
We as the public, in a larger sense and in the smaller sense, we see some of these campaigns and then we reward that behavior, and that the opposite should be happening. So if we don't like the way that people are campaigning, then we should be standing up and saying that should not be allowed in the civic arena, and it shouldn't matter what position it's for. But we as the public, everybody has to be the ones to stand up and say, talking about people's kids, or talking about, we're digging up every single little thing in somebody's past. If it's not really relevant to the position that they're going for, if it's not going to amount to anything, it shouldn't be brought up in debate. And if we're going to debate, let's talk about what's actually going on, not the person. And a lot of times the person is used to get around the issues. There's a lot going on at the state level, at the city level that need public eyes on it.
Yeah.
And instead it's all about the personalities and who's there. Oh, it's this person and they're doing this. No, it's more about the issue. Like, what's in the bill? How much does it cost?
Right.
Who's for and against it? When I was at legislature, that was my whole job. I wrote summaries of bills that were coming up for vote.
Oh, yeah.
And so a number of legislators had my packet at their desk. Yeah. So they knew how much it cost in 2017. They knew how much was for and against it.
What it actually did.
Right. Yes. And then they would take it up to the well, which is where they would speak from. And they would talk about the bill based on sometimes things that I wrote. And so I had the privilege of sitting on the floor of the Kansas House off to the side, because I'm not a representative, off to the side when they passed the bill to remove the brownback tax experiment.
Oh, yeah.
So I got to see that vote happen live. That was
a crazy time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So CNN was there and they got me and I circled myself in the photo.
That's funny. So before we hit record today, you and I were talking a little bit about a few things. One of them was the Kansas Leadership Center.
Yes.
Because we've both done some things there. And I went late last year. I was invited to participate in a program they did. They brought in about 40 elected officials from across the state, but all different. So some were city council, some were school board. Mm-hmm. One was a water commissioner. Yeah. And the point of that program was to let us talk for 2 days about, even though we all have different challenges, what are our similarities being an elected official and how are we managing it and how can we do better? And that was 2 days of just wonderful, intensive work that really helped me both, as an elected official and honestly as a person. We had some great general conversations. So I have a lot of good things to say about the Kansas Leadership Center. So you want to talk a little about your journey there and what they've helped you with and what your purpose of engaging with them is long term, or what your goal is of going through them. And just so people know, they're based out of Wichita.
Yes.
They've been around, I have no idea how long. I don't know the history, but it's been a while.
I think it's 10 or 12 years.
It might be longer than that. And they have a book they give everybody, and it's really great, and it's inspirational, but it's also leadership. But they go around the state and do programs to help. Not just, I was there for an elected official program, but a lot of it's just for people who either want to be in positions of leadership or be leaders in their community, or are in positions of leadership and looking to do better. So
they've done some reworking of their program, but I was in a civic group, and there was a grant for me to take their Your Leadership Edge program in 2020 during the pandemic. We had done, it was the very first Zoom version of their program. And so I got to take that. It changed my entire perspective on leadership. It changed my life, because the idea is that anybody can be a leader. It's about engaging others. It's about, diagnosing the situation. It's about, managing yourself. There's a lot of times that people who are in leadership, they don't manage themselves, and then that becomes a problem. Yep. But all of the training that they give, it's part of it's about you, but part of it's about engaging others on the issues of the day. And when you get everybody on board with the idea that anybody can be a leader, you don't have to be the boss at work to be a leader. You can still work with your teammates, and you can get the things done that you need to do by talking with each other, by trying to help each other. It's not necessarily even servant leadership all the time. Some of it's just trying to help each other figure out, okay, why is this happening? Or if there's a disagreement, okay, well, they might be upset for this reason, and maybe you hadn't thought about that before. Yeah. And just those ideas in this time are radical. And so the Kansas Leadership Center, I talk about them all the time. I talk about them at work. I talk about them in the community, because they have an excellent framework. Yeah. And so, I have it for myself personally, but also I got to take their Your Leadership Edge program again just a few months ago because of my work with the Department of Corrections. So, we are all trying to find ways to improve our state, our country, our city, our community, and it takes time and it takes effort.
I think your point about you don't have to be the boss to be a leader.
Yeah.
He's in it. Look, there's the old axiom, leaders are born. And there's truth to that. There are people who literally, for whatever reason, they just suddenly they have that and they walk into the room and they can do it and they're great at it and it was natural. And so you always think, well, that's a leader. And good for those people. Those are wonderful personalities. But to your point, what they tap into is no, you have to look at it in those micro, like you don't have to be in certain positions to consider yourself a leader.
Right.
Look around the world you're in what you do, and how can you be a leader within that environment, and look for that and find those ways. And then you'll build upon it over time. And I think people get frustrated with that concept of, and the best example I can give, which is, I think I've mentioned this before on here, is there's only 10 of us on our city council. You got 9 city council people and a mayor. There are 125,000 people in this community. The 10 of us are not the leaders of the community, and that's it, right? I mean, that's not how we get things moving. In fact, there are just as many people in this community who participate in government who have gotten just as many things done sometimes as elected officials who are sitting up on that days, every Tuesday night. And so I think that's what I have to remind people is don't just think you have to be elected to do it. There are so many other ways. Just take a look around. You don't, to your point, you don't have to be the boss to find that.
And what's scary is that leadership takes risk.
Yeah.
And so many people don't recognize that. And that's what I was talking about loss earlier, right? Anytime that there's a change, there's going to be a faction of people, and it doesn't matter if it's a big issue or a small issue, there's going to be a faction of people who are going to have some sort of loss to your change. And so you have to identify them and try to figure out how they can add their ingredients to the community pot, and be like, hey, I understand that, when we take this park and we turn it into this other thing, that maybe your kids aren't going to have the space to play, but what it's going to do is also beautify the area. It's going to raise up home prices. It's going to allow us to provide programming, or, you have to find the things that you can engage them with and help them be on your team, even though they're going to lose something.
Yeah.
And that's still risky. A lot of times, and if you think back to COVID, right, when people were making decisions, they weren't able to make decisions with full information. And in leadership, you never can. Sometimes you have to make decisions on the fly. And that's what's scary for a lot of people. And that's why a lot of people, I think, don't run for office, because they don't want to be the one to have their name on it. But it's important that they do, because you might be that person listening that, hey, you had the right insight at the right time with the right knowledge, that you were the right leader because you knew, or because you had the intuition, or because you engaged the right people, and now it's solved. And that's great.
Well, we've created that environment. A lot of it's national, but you'll see this at the state level, and it's trickled down to the local level, of this idea of people who project themselves as elected officials who, I got all the answers.
Right.
I'm not wrong. I don't make mistakes. If I voted that way, it's because we had to. I didn't have any other choice, as opposed to sometimes saying, yeah, I've taken a lot of votes. I've been sitting here for a few years. I will stand by 98% of my record, but that other 2 or 5%, whatever number you want to pick, here's why I made the decision, and it may have been the wrong one. You don't hear that very. Everyone wants this stoic. Nope, you elected me, and I've got it all figured out.
Yeah.
Well, hell, that's not a way. I mean, I wish I tell people all the time that when people complain about certain things, rightfully so, I'm like, you know what? I'm with you on that one. I probably should have done a little differently. Look at how I'm fixing it, and try not to focus on. I will admit that mistake, but that I think has led to that, the fear of people saying, well, what if I don't understand it? Because all these other people who run seem to have it figured out. And I'm like, no, they don't. It's a facade, man. It's a facade.
So many people don't realize that the people who are at the legislature or at Congress or at city council, they are not issue experts.
Yeah.
That's why we have issue experts. That's supposed to be the whole point, is that the Congress or the legislature or the city council, they're bringing in information, and they're supposed to be making the decision that best helps everybody. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that like to play games with that process rather than focus on, okay, how can I get the best outcome for all of my constituents? And we know there's other functions of, running for office that involves money, and that has its own influence. But it's people are not, if you are engaged and you understand what's going on, then you can understand why they're voting the way they are. And you know that they're also making wrong decisions, but they're not going to say they're making wrong decisions because most people are not engaged and they don't understand because it seems complicated and it seems big. And it is big because society is complicated and society is big. Yeah. If we had, a simple society, we would have a simple government.
Right. We'll get there, right? Wait, no?
No, I don't. We're going to get more complicated. It's going to happen.
So do you want to talk about your endeavor you're trying to reboot?
Yeah. Well, I suppose I can if you want me to.
You don't have to. It's fine. If you do, then I'll just tell. So the first time I met you was 8 years ago when I first ran for office, and you had a I don't know what you call it, a podcast. Actually, it was televised, right? It was. I don't know what we called it 8 years ago.
I mean, it wasn't much of a podcast. More like a video interview.
Yeah,
show.
I probably had some. They've evolved into whatever this is today, right? But it was TopCity Today, right? Yep. And it was a way to engage with the community. And at that time, because you invited me on because we was running for office, you were getting all the candidates on. So there's the setup for.
Yeah. So the TopCity Today, the idea is that we would get all of the people running for city council just to talk about what they believe in, not even asking difficult questions, asking open-ended questions, because I wanted to hear what they had to say without it being some sort of soundbite, without it being some sort of, hey, gotcha. I wanted honest thoughts. I wanted honest answer. Even if I didn't agree with them, I wanted them to explain who they were and why people should vote for them in their own words, without it seeming like I'm trying to guide the conversation into being a certain area. I would ask follow-up questions, but I tried to make sure they were open-ended as possible so they had complete wiggle room to say what they were wanting to say over what I was trying to say, because I didn't think that would help the voters. I wanted the voters to be able to see their video and say, okay, that's the person I want to vote for. And so we were going to move into, doing stuff with the community, doing interviews with like business owners and stuff like that. We had some members on the volunteer team that had some issues, and so I had to stop the show. Yeah. And so now I've got with somebody. I'm trying to restart it. I've redone my logo. I've got a whole Facebook page. I'm trying to rebuild that infrastructure. That way I can get back to talking to people in the community. Plus, with my work, I don't get to be as creative. And so I want that creative outlet again, have something really positive to focus on, highlight positive things in Topeka, have fun. Yeah. There is nothing greater than being able to talk to somebody about this passion project they've been working on and how excited they are. Yeah. And then other people watch it and they're like, hey, this guy's awesome. Or this person's awesome.
Yeah, I didn't know they were doing that. And now I know. I want to go find it or search it out or see if I can be a part of it.
Right. And the issue the reason why I started it anyway was because Topeka has a problem with communication in itself. So people who live in the northwest side of town do not really know the people from the southeast side of town. It's almost like they're set up in quadrants. Yeah. And nobody, if there's local businesses in town, you've probably not heard of them because word of mouth in Topeka is so disjointed. And that's why so many businesses crop up and then they fail, in my opinion, because there's just not that level of communication, word of mouth. There's so many businesses that they have trouble being able to advertise because it costs money. It costs resources to hire teams to advertise on the internet, advertise on billboards, have a storefront, trying to
meet. In this day and age, where do you advertise? There's it used to be you had the newspaper, the radio, and maybe the TV if you could, and that was it. And then the internet exploded, and then all these other forms of we got on our phone. And so now it's like, where in the heck do I even spend that dollar that I'm going to see who's going to hear about me?
It's super interesting with the phone. It's like a billboard in your hand. Every single website you go on half of it's tracking you.
Right.
And those are why you get some of the ads that you do. So, you drive by the Spangles and maybe you see a Spangles ad because you drove by the Spangles.
Spangles ad's going to be on my phone now.
Yeah,
you said that.
It's
It's
probably
listening, and the next time I pick up my phone when this is over, I'm going to see a Spangles ad right in my social media.
No, I always find it fun when people are like, "Oh, the government's watching us." It's not the government.
Right.
It's
the phone companies and the satellites.
It's the people who are trying to advertise because they want to let you know that they exist, and that's sometimes a good thing and a bad thing. Who has that data? Why are they using it? Are they keeping it secure? So all those things are interesting. But I wanted to bring back the fun and bring back the excitement of being able to talk to people running for city council, being able to talk about those things in the community that no one else is talking about, because the local news, we like them. They cover a lot, but there's things that they can't cover. Yeah. They can't deep dive. And that's their problem.
All right, so I ask every guest to bring a few questions for me. I always say I have no idea what they are, so
that's true.
This is your chance.
That's true.
If people have even tried to tell me, I'll tell you. I'm like, no, I don't want to know.
Nope.
So if you have gotcha questions, this is your chance.
No, I'm not going to.
I don't see any anything papers or anything like you're about to pull out secret files.
No, I'm not Perry Mason. This isn't court TV. So, I want to ask, what is, in your mind, the 3 biggest opportunities that Topeka has to improve?
Yeah. So you touched on one of them. These are in no particular order.
Yeah.
You touched on one of them, and that's having something that attracts people into the city and to stay here.
Yes.
We have little pockets of that. I mean, it is amazing how many people bring their kids from the Osage County, Jackson County areas and those areas to Discovery Center, to the zoo, to Nodo, and people who are traveling through the city. So we do have those.
The micro tourism.
Right. But we haven't found what I'd call the corridor of that, where you can come here and say, this is kind of the path where you can spend the day or 2 days here and do this kind of series of things. And we haven't even put the things we have together in a very organized fashion to some degree to say, this is what you should do. So that's it. I've talked to some folks. I was at a luncheon with TPD, Topeka Police Department interns. Okay, 3 of them go to Washburn, but 4 of them, one was from Arkansas, one down in Pitt State, and they're all 19 to 22 going to college. And I asked, I was like, so you've been here now for a month, all of you, like, what's missing? And they were like, well, we kind of go to Lawrence in the evenings because of Mass Street, right? And so we haven't developed that entertainment or hub of a center where you can go downtown, and we've tried, but we need to do work. So that's one of them, is keeping people to say, you're always going to want to go to Kansas City because they have T-Mobile Center and that kind of, which is great, but keeping them here to know that more often than not, there's something that attracts them here. So that's one of them. That's the fun one.
Yeah.
I think the other one is, we touched on it too. It's literally a growth opportunity is if we don't build more houses and homes and duplexes and apartments, it's not going to matter what we do because there's no place for people to live.
Right.
Literally, there's no place for people to live, or our stock is so flat that the rental rates and the cost of buying things is going to go so high without other inventory to spread that around. I'm not going to keep people either. I'm going to price them out of their homes, or they're going to look for a place to move and say, well, maybe I'll just go out into the county or even further. I'm going to go over to Douglas County, Jackson County, Osage County, and
basic supply and demand.
Yeah. So that one's literally a growth, a growth problem. I think the other area we can grow in is, well, that's a good question because I have like 3 or 4 in my head. I want top 3, huh? Top 3. Yeah. We have to retain, or at least get people to return here. So we have 5,000 students at Washburn.
Yep.
The percentage of them who sticks around in this community is ridiculously small. Yeah. That's 5,000 people who chose to come here to get a good education at our university, and yet are like, it's been fun, Topeka. Now I'm going to take everything I learned and developed in your community, and I'm out. Yeah. And they're going somewhere else. And I can even live with that if it's for a little while, but I want them to think about, if they get that first job 2 years later, say, hey, now that I've got experience, I want to get back to Topeka. My goal was to take this job so I could turn it into an opportunity back in Topeka. I won't say we don't do that at all, but not really. We're not making an effort to do that either. I don't think we're engaging I don't think our community is engaging with those kids at Washburn. We have ways we could do it as part of government. We have ways we could help our businesses do it. We have ways our community could do it a little better. We got to keep people here, the younger people. I love all the old people. In fact, I just saw that the state of Kansas, though, we increased 2%. Our age went up 2% in the state of Kansas. We're an aging state, which means we're an aging city. We got to keep the young people here.
Yeah. So we are not a traditional university town.
Yeah.
Like, say, Lawrence, right? And that has always been kind of like a, why hasn't Washburn really hammered in and been like, hey, we need to have university
They've
spirit.
only been here over 100 years.
Right.
What do you expect?
Right. That fraternity I was with, they've been around since 1919, and that was, during the World War II.
Yeah.
So, it used to be Lincoln College, and then Washburn donated $25,000. It's like $250,000 in today's money or something like that. I'm not a math major. I am not an economics major. That is a number I pulled out of my head. But it was enough to make him be, Washburn University. Like our sports and, all these things that KU does to, make it a college town, engage the community, have all of the entertainment and the nightlife and, the tourism factor. Most of our workforce here is state employees.
Yep.
Almost
40% of the population in Topeka travels here. Our workforce travels here to work and then leaves again.
Yep. A lot of bed towns around Topeka.
Yep. And on one hand, it's great to be a hub. I mean, we are a center for, we have the Sam's Club if you live in Osage County, Jackson County, and that's great. And we need to develop more of that concept of, I'm not just building it for Topeka, I'm recognizing if I put this here, I actually have another 150,000 people surrounding Topeka who will utilize it.
Right.
But I have to look at it as in that perspective too, because that benefits us if people are coming here constantly instead of going back home.
Right. You would think that with as many people who are like, yeah, no, I'm going to leave my small town. I'm going to go out, travel the world. And then what do? They end up going back home. But that doesn't happen for Topeka, even though Topeka is the biggest one-horse town this side of the border.
So those are my three for the day. But I think they would make it. If we could accomplish those three, man, we'd be way, way far ahead of the game.
Yeah. The only other question that I have, and unfortunately this is more of a governance question, but that's because I get tired of it. We patch the potholes with this patch asphalt, and then it rains, and then it washes out, and then we spend the money to patch it again.
Yeah. You don't think that's efficient?
I don't think that's efficient at all. I do know somebody came out with some sort of like, you're supposed to fill it, and then it's like this cover that's supposed to go over it, so then it doesn't wash out. But it just seems like we're constantly spinning our wheels with the pothole situation, and I don't understand why.
So you're right. We're getting a little better, but you're still right. And I'll tell you the ways we're getting better and where we need to do better. So we'll start with the good. The good is we have a relatively new, I keep saying that, although he's been here 6 months now, 7 months, public works director.
Yeah.
Steve Groen. He's very smart. Like I've just been completely impressed by him. And he comes from areas where ground was cracking and, having issues constantly. So he had a little background in this problem. And he has looked at the materials we're using and that concept of what you're talking about, which is when they go out, they throw a pail of stuff in there, they patch it down, and then 3 days later, either rain or cars went over it and it's a pothole again.
Yep.
Now, sometimes when it's really cold, you don't have a choice because you can't do concrete. But when they're doing that in the middle of summer, what are we doing, right? So he's looked at the material and to exactly your point, covering them, making sure that they can heal right and seal right, and then they don't have that issue and we can actually address them. We actually just also started it's going around citywide where we're doing that, and then we're sealing our streets, which is not something we have done for apparently, maybe, I won't say ever, that's probably not accurate, but a long time. And even though that means some of the cracks and stuff are going to stay in the streets, what happens is you get those cracks, they get water, then they either get really hot or they get really cold, and then you start to expand and explode. Well, if you seal them, that's not going to happen.
Right.
And so we are currently, right now, you may see the trucks out there because it seals, it apparently dries within minutes or so they don't have to close down streets. They can go out there, block off a little area. That's going to help with that the long-term problem of solving that we won't get as many potholes because we're sealing the dang streets. The other thing that I have advocated for is we have some streets they're not on our project list for 5 years,
Mhm.
but they're in bad shape. Now we do use an index.
Mhm.
It's a
Yes.
PSI, and
Yes.
it is real. I know people
Yeah.
because I'll get calls about a road,
No, I've seen it before.
and it does work. I mean, because they basically laser down into the road, and it tells them how. And there's roads you can look at. You're like, that road looks much better than this road over here, and they'll tell you, yeah, it looks that way, but it's literally about to crumble beneath itself. While actually that one's got holes in it, but it's technically better, for the time being. But I've said those roads that are still 5 years out from even being totally repaired, we need to go overlay them.
Mhm.
It costs a little bit of money, but it's still over time, to your point, more efficient and a little cheaper than sending crews out there over and over and over again. Just go overlay it, and then in 5 years, because what staff will tell me is, well, those overlays only last 3 to 5 years. Well, if it's on the project list in 5 years, who cares?
Right.
Who cares?
Well, not only that, but we have that problem where people like to kick the can down the road.
Right.
And so in city government, when that happens, so if you have services, if you have, big issues like the roads, or we're talking, when we're delaying the funding or we're delaying the work, then that means it's going to pile up over time. So if you cut in the name of the budget, we're gonna not fund this service. Well, just understand that in the next 5 to 7 years, we're going to be at it again, and the price is going to be double or triple what it would have been if we had taken care of it when it was still a smaller issue. And so, sometimes that micro political expediency gets in the way of just doing the civic government work, which I think is super important.
And we're seeing that now. Some of the road work we're trying to play catch up on was because, to your point, for 20 years, they kicked it down the road.
Yep.
And then now some of us get on the council in the last few years and we're like, I grew up here. I know that road's needed. I swear, since I was a kid. And they're like, yeah, well, it costs so much. And we're like, come on. Now we have to figure out, to your point, it's compounding upon itself.
Yeah.
A real problem that also exists is we have some capacity financially to do a couple other projects. We literally don't have the contractors do it.
Yeah.
Because they are maxed out doing our projects, other city projects. Now, we could, in some cases, bring a contractor from a state or two away, but the cost goes up astronomically because they have to bring in people, they have to truck stuff longer. And so you start to look at that and say, I can wait 6 more months on that project because that is still cheaper in the long run. Yeah. So that's a real problem that I can't solve that problem, except work around it. And
the unfortunate part is
get more people to go into if you want a good job, go into the construction business, go get a construction job. They're out there. They're desperate. Help us out.
Yes. Well, the other thing too, a lot of people forget is that the bidding process for government means that it's going to cost more versus if you were like a private person or there might be people in town that are like, hey, I could do all that patchwork and it would be X amount cheaper. But the problem is when you're doing that bidding process and you're like, okay, well, this is the quality of work I have, and these are the guys I have, and we got to pay prevailing wages.
Yep.
Then all of a sudden that price goes from being, a $500 job to a $1,700, $3,000 job, and it's not any different than what's happening elsewhere.
No. Well, we had a project last year where we had a water pipe break at 21st and Westport in my district, and it took a lot longer than it should have because we as a city, once that pipe broke, we tore up the street, we got in there and we said, oh man, there's some other stuff in here that needs worked on.
Yep.
And so we had a choice. We could have just covered it. It would have been done in a week. We all would have moved on in that busy intersection. And then 2 years from now, maybe it explodes again and we're doing it again. And so you have to make those decisions at the time. And our staff at the time said, we're in there. It is going to be a pain. And it was closed for a month and a chaos because you got interstate, you get on and off there, and it was madness. But I now know that all that piping under there is good and should be good for the next 50 years, as opposed to having to tear it up again in 2 years. And so sometimes people are always like, that project took too long. Sometimes they're right, and we talk about it. But sometimes I'm like, well, here's why. It took some extra work, which is good for us in the long run, but totally sucked for that month that we all had to live with it.
And that's the call. That's the risky part of leadership that we was talking about.
Yeah. Awesome. All right.
I mean, that's my two big things.
That's good.
I'm not going to be out here trying to got you on your own show. That's ridiculous.
Well, that's all right.
I mean, I'm a ridiculous person, but
so one of the issues I did want to talk to you about,
Mm-hmm.
because for all the reasons you've talked about, you've got some experience running for office, you've worked with the different levels of government.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting a lot of questions right now about our form of government.
yes,
Because we have a city manager form of government. Then people say, well, then why do we need a mayor? Why do we even need half a council? And we've gone through some of that explanation on here before, and we can go into that again. But really, I just want to talk about, from your perspective as a citizen who's now been here for however long you can remember, 10 or 12 years, depending on what number you want to pick. What is your perception of our form of government and how it works or doesn't work? And, having lived in it now for half its period life, because we're only 20 years into this form of government in Topeka. So you've been here for half of that.
Yeah. So Kansas is very interesting. We have several different city forms of government that can happen. So you can have council, city manager. You can have a city commission where each of the members of the commission basically run a department. You can, and the mayor rotates, so if you've ever been to Manhattan, Kansas, you've been in a commission city. At Topeka, we have a professional city manager who's got a degree, who's selected by the council. The mayor runs the meeting. They have the opportunity with votes that are tied. Sometimes they're allowed to vote without it being tied. Sometimes they have a veto power. When I ran for city government in Augusta, right, their form of government, their mayor couldn't vote unless there was a tie, but they ran the meeting, and they had a veto on all items. So the interesting thing in Kansas is you can have these different forms of city government, but you are allowed to fine tune it. So the mayor's powers can be different in every city. Some of them are really just a figurehead. All they do is they preside over the meeting. Some places you don't necessarily even have to have a mayor. It's just most people like having the idea, hey, here's this person I should go talk to. Right. But the whole idea of a city manager came about, 50 years ago, I think, where people were saying we need professional administration of government service, right? So in Shawnee County, a lot of you may know that we have the Shawnee County Department of Corrections, and it's not under the sheriff.
Yeah.
In other counties, it is under the sheriff. Someone had come about and said, well, professionally, don't you think it would be a conflict of interest for the sheriff who arrests the people to be also maintaining custody over those people who they arrest? Somebody said, well, we should have a professional management of the correction side and allow the sheriff's office to be just for out there being in the public versus running the jail too. And so that's how that came about. So it's entirely possible. If we wanted to have a strong mayor government like Chicago, we could do it. Every 4 years, a city has an opportunity to change their form of government and adopt new city charter ordinances. So far, I think council has made clear to whoever is the manager. We've gone through several now, though. Oh, yeah. It's happened quite a we've
I'm on my
through.
6th year, 5th city manager.
Yeah.
Now 2 of those were interims, but still, nonetheless, they still count. They were doing the job.
Yes. And we've also gone through a number of police chiefs as well. And I have no problem with a mayor who has ability to do vetoes. I have no problem with a mayor who has ability to vote or split ties.
Which in Topeka, mayor has all those powers, veto and gets to vote on certain things.
I have no problem with that. What always kind of, I think, gets the citizens kind of questioning is, okay, well, the mayor's not, they're in the office 24/7. They're not administrating things, but they're the chief executive. And so, really it's the council that probably has more, as a group, has more power over city government than the mayor. And a lot of people like the idea of being, hey, I can elect the person who's directly in charge of everything. And a lot of them just don't know that we have these different forms of city government.
Yeah, the two things I've told people when they've said, well, we should go back to strong mayor form or something like this, I said, well, there is a medium, and that is switching to what we would call like a city administrator form of government, which is a fine line distinction, but it is a distinction. It means you have that professional maintaining every day and having oversight over thing, but you're giving more of the actual authority of approval of the contracts and hiring and firing back to your mayor and your council, but you're making sure then that administrator is literally just administrating what they're dictating. Now, that's kind of what we do now under the city manager, because as our city manager will tell you, he has a lot of leeway, but if he's not moving in a path that the collective council and mayor have said you should move in, it's going to be a real short tenure real quick, and there's going to be a lot of conflict and problems.
Right. And there are some communities, not now, for instance, Augusta, where I ran for mayor, they have a city manager.
Yeah.
So it's not just. Let me back out here. So in Kansas, we have 3 different classes of cities, and it's based on population. So we have class 3 cities, which are like below 10,000 people. We've got class 2 cities, which are like 10,000 to, I think it's like 50,000. I could be wrong about that number.
Usually in the 20s, give or take. You can actually stay a second class city even if your population gets up to 50,000.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you've got class 1 cities, which is like Topeka,
there's only 10
Wichita,
of us. 625 cities, and there's literally only 10 in the state of Kansas at 50,000 or more.
And so one of the ones that a lot of people don't talk about very often, form of government for cities, is what goes on in Wyandotte County.
Yeah.
So Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, they have what's called a unified form of government. And what they have is what would be the city council and the county council are joined together in one government because it's more efficient. There's so much space is taken up by the city of Kansas City, Kansas, that they're basically also the county. So they combined their city and county government. There's only a handful of those in the country.
Yep.
We do that partially here in Topeka with the Parks Department.
Yep.
So all of the city parks inside Topeka are ran by the county. Another area that does that is the Riley County Police. So, they kind of have more of Manhattan and the county kind of situation. They don't call themselves the Sheriff's Department. It's the Riley County Police. It's very interesting. So it's, I've always thought that it would be interesting for Topeka to look into a unified government, because we have only 3 members of the Shawnee County Commission. And I think that's kind of weird for, because I came from Butler County. Butler County has like 7 people on the
3's hard because they can't even have a conversation with each other except in public. So they can't even have lunch to be like, hey, how you feeling?
Yeah.
What do you think?
And that's due to the Kansas Open Records, Open Meetings Acts. So
and that's how it should be for everybody to know. I agree with that, but some people have talked about if they would expand it to 5, but then you're adding more government, and that becomes an issue.
And so, personally, I think it's something that should be considered, is that the county and the city of Topeka look into becoming a unified government, and that means all of the services would roll together. So instead of having the Topeka Police and the Shawnee County Sheriffs, it would be a Shawnee County Police Department. Instead of having Public Works for the county and Public Works for the city, we could combine it together and just take care of everybody. Obviously there's other things that would not be in there, like, the school system.
Right. They've got their school
The school system,
already.
the school board is separate. The water districts are separate. Any recreational districts are separate.
Yeah.
They're in the United States, there are over 85,000 units of government, and most of them are counties, cities, school districts, water districts, airport authorities, you name it. And it's because we have to have that fine tuning. It's not to make government big. It's to make it to where the people in your community are running your community and not the president.
Yep. All right. Well, we got email of the week. You ready?
Oh, yeah.
I'll let you read it to me.
Oh, right.
We'll see how the email of the week goes this week.
Okay. Dear Duncan, I hear gunshots going off in my neighborhood every once in a while. I don't know where exactly they're coming from, but I know the general area. Should I call the police? Will they even do anything?
Do you ever hear gunshots in your neighborhood?
I have.
I have too in mine. Yeah.
I had a murder take place nearly 20 feet from my front door.
Yeah.
There in North Topeka. More recently, there was a rolling shoot-off that happened where I live. I called and they came to the neighborhood, and they found him. I know that Topeka police answers calls. I've done ride-alongs with them. I've done one on first shift, one on second shift. I've seen them do uses of force. It's not like they were hiding anything,
Right. Well, and I got this email, and I've had this question a few times at some neighborhood association meetings. And what I tell folks is, and what the police department will tell you is, like, if you hear just one gunshot and you don't feel like that's worth calling, that's your choice, but you should and you can. And what they'll say is, even if you don't know where it came from, or if you heard a couple shots, but you know it's over there somewhere in that little area of houses, they will show up. They will walk around there wherever they can, and they will tell you they will oftentimes find shell casings, which they can pick up once they're in those public areas. Once they've been shot into the sidewalk or the right of way, they will take them and then they go back and put them into a system.
Yeah,
and every gun is it's its own fingerprint.
Yes,
every shell casing can tell you what gun it came from, and the national database tells people that. And so they will say it's amazing how many times they're able to collect that, put it in the system, and suddenly, because stolen guns travel, and they will find it, and it'll hit, and suddenly you've either got the FBI or the KBI saying, "Wait a minute, we've been tracking that gun from this thing for." That was used in a murder or a criminal case. And so they'll come out here and eventually they find more people than you think. Yeah. Just because someone decided to finally call the police department and say, I am tired of hearing gunshots in this area of the neighborhood. And so I tell people, yes, it's frustrating and it's scary and it stinks that it happens, but the police will, they may not show up in the moment, but they will get out there, they will look around, and it can actually yield real answers long term, not just for people in our community, but for across the country.
Yes. And I know some of you who might be listening may have heard, like New York City has those listening posts that try to find out where gunshots are. That costs so much money that it is prohibitive for a city of our size to have something like that. It's important that when you hear gunshots, you should call it in, because number one, they're going to have a location. You're going to give them your address. You say you heard it. If other people call in, well, now we're starting to triangulate where the shots came from. The other thing too is it helps show history pattern of what's going on in the criminal community, right? They're still part of Topeka. That they're not some separate part of Topeka. They're here too. The other thing too, we've got the Real-Time Crime Center. We also have a service where they're working on trying to hook in like Ring cameras and home security cameras and business cameras into the Real-Time Crime Center. And what's cool about that is, so that murder that happened, 20, 25 feet from my doorstep, they found the same guy within 24 hours. They found the guy who did it.
People's various Ring cameras,
right? And the neighbor who had it, their camera saw it happen. Yeah. And so it was so fortunate for that family, because that was people in my neighborhood, that it was one of their family members that got killed. That's crazy. And and I was very sad for them, and I had just moved into the place. I'm like, oh man, I hope I didn't pick a bad place, but it's been working out. And people say, oh, Topeka has so much crime. Topeka has basically the same amount of crime as any other city of its size. It's just that we are so geographically spread out, right? For the population we have, we should be geographically smaller, but we're not. And so that's why I brought up the idea about combining it all together. Because we're constantly seem like we're spreading out more and more all the time. So, conserve resources. All
right. Well, on that happy note of gunshots, we wrap up every week with the question of the week.
Yes.
So I'll ask you the question. This will be the question is basically the question is, do you see, I want to know if people see themselves in Topeka in 10 years. because again, that goes back to us keeping people here, getting people to stay here. So you've been here now 10 years. Do you think you're going to be here in another 10 years?
I think I'm going to be here in another 10 years. Topeka.
I know I am. So sorry, Topeka. If you wanted me out of here, I'm not going anywhere. But.
Topeka has changed a lot since I moved here. The Greater Topeka Partnership formed up. There's been a lot of discussion about how do we, get mental health services back in the community. We've been the nonprofit capital of America for a while. We've got more nonprofits per capita than we do.
It's crazy, and part of that's because we're a capital city,
right?
But that's also, that's
we're such a unique. I mean, now every city can say they're unique, but it's just this confluence of history and population and the opportunities that we have. We used to have the Miniger Foundation. We used to have all these mental health hospitals. We'd have famous people come through because they were trying to get treatment. Like what a way to be on the map for something. Wichita, well, they get to claim they're the air capital of the world, even though they lost Boeing, but now they got Spirit. I've got connections with that, but I see myself being here for a while. I want Topeka to improve, though, and it's got a lot of opportunity to do so. We need the nightlife. We need to get the macro tourism. We don't have it. Just because we have the capital, that's not enough.
Yeah.
So we need to figure out how we can encourage people to create businesses or to create, things to do in town. And there are a lot of things already to do. Right, we've got Noto, the first Friday. That was the most people I've ever seen.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's become
in North
an event.
Topeka. Lots of businesses down there that are open at that time. We've got our Wanamaker corridor. We've got so many unique shops and businesses. It's just that nobody knows about them because of marketing, and so and the communication. We've got all these events happening downtown now with the 7th Street stage. Thank you to Capital Federal. Thanks to them for building that. And Evergy for doing that. But people don't realize that they can go down there and get a free concert.
Yeah,
like
a couple times a week.
Right.
Lunch, dinner.
Yeah.
No, it's great. We've got a lot of it.
So
So hopefully that's the stuff that keeps you here for the next 10 years and
right.
keeps everyone else here.
Right. Then, and also I think that the city, both the community, like stakeholders, the council, the everyday people, that we all come together to try to find out where do we want to go from here? What do we want our theme to be? Are we going to be the city that, we're gonna be that university city? Are we gonna be, this is the state capital, and we're gonna have golden streets, and we're gonna, do that type of thing, that we're just gonna be the political hub, and we're gonna trim everything out? Or are we gonna be that, this is the best place to raise a family, and that's gonna have to engage a lot of people. We're talking about making sure the school district is doing their job, making sure our parks department is, keeping everything jiving, making sure that we're, being mindful of our neighbors as we're doing our day-to-day business. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for Topeka to improve. It's just I feel like we're in a weird growing pain. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you're always kind of in that. You want to be developing as a city, but we got to start making some bigger steps instead of baby steps. Yeah. And I think that's kind of where we're at. It's
important that we define not necessarily a target. I don't want to create like a target, but we need a goal to aim at. What is it that we want to do as Topeka, right? What do we want our claim to fame to be? And then that's what we need to go for, and we need to go in on it, and then everything else hopefully will follow.
Well, people can engage with us on Facebook and Instagram at the Civic Circus. They can go answer that question. And that's it, man. I really appreciate you being here, Traevor. Trae, for the rest of the world, it's all good. But thank you. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. And also, you can find TopCity Today on Facebook. We're going to work on getting to other platforms. But, I'm super thankful to get to share this with you today.
Awesome.
Great co-creation, yeah.
Thanks for being here. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.